Begin. All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. I'm Soha Sulaiman, and I'll be your moderator for the evening. The Muslims of Dufferin, Muslims of Shelburne Center, and myself would like to welcome you all to today's Black Brilliance event in honor of Black Heritage Month. I know we are all keen and excited to get started, so let's begin with the beautiful recitation of the Holy Quran by Sheikh Yahya Sulaiman.
Thank you, Soha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran says, O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female, and made you peoples and tribes, that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed, Allah is knowing and acquainted. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh. That was, wow, a very heart-touching verse, mashallah. All right, it is a great pleasure and honor for me to introduce our guest speakers for the evening. So tonight we have with us Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick, one of the first two students from the West who received a bachelor's degree from the Islamic University of Medina in 1979. He holds a master's degree and PhD from the University of Toronto, and he has traveled to over 60 countries, delivering lectures at universities, mosques, and events. He has served as an imam, teacher, counselor, and media consultant in USA, Canada, South America, and the West Indies. He's a senior lecturer with the Islamic Institute of Toronto and the Al-Maghrib Institute. He's also an outreach coordinator with the Canadian Council of Imams and the advisory committee member at the Islamic Online University. He's Sheikh Abdullah Hakim Quick is also head of the history department, and in recognition of his contributions in Canada, he has received the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. So without further ado, Sheikh Abdullah, please take it away.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam Rasulullah wa ba'd. All praise are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be upon all of the great prophets, Prophet Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, and all of those righteous ones from the beginning of time. I begin with the greeting words of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It is a great privilege and an honor to be with you, the Muslims of the Dufferin and the officials in that area. And it's an excellent idea to be celebrating Black brilliance, to take a very serious look at some of the contributions made by African people, especially during Black History Month. And just a little background before we go into some of the brilliance. We have to remember that Black History Month officially in the Americas began around 1926. Carter G. Woodson, an African-American historian, began what they called Negro History Week, and then it eventually evolved into Black History Month and was recognized in the United States and in Canada. And one of his statements is very interesting. He said, if a race has no history, it has no worthwhile tradition. It becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated. And so literally what they found out, when they looked at the curriculums of the schools and colleges and universities throughout the West, they found that the trace of African people and the contributions were actually being either wiped out completely or distorted. And so they initiated this time period as a means of refocusing the minds of people upon the contributions made by African people. And that was a great challenge because it stood in the face of racism. And racism in the West, and we are dealing with what is now termed as white supremacy. Racism has three parts. And before we celebrate the brilliance, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Racism, the essence of racism is ideas. It's an ideology that one group is superior to another group. The ideas express themselves individually with racist names and behaviors and character. And that's generally how people know racism. But probably the most dangerous form of the racism is institutionalized racism. And that is where the color of your skin, your ethnicity, possibly your religion, but in this case, we're dealing with race, impacts your value in society. And so what we're looking at mainly in Black History Month is the ideas. It's the ideology. And that is what we call deconstructing history, because there are a set of so-called facts that have been taught to us. When I was growing up here in the Americas, I was taught, and many people are still being taught, that Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492. And many schools are not saying this now, but I traveled around the world and I asked people and they said, yes, Columbus discovered America. But my question was to my teacher as a young boy growing up in the United States was, how can you discover a place when people are living there already? And literally, when we look at the history, we find that Columbus was actually lost and he bumped into America on his way to India. So he called the First Nations people Indians. And when he returned to Spain, he could not properly explain where he had been. And so when we deconstruct history, we take it apart. When we put it together, I would say, if I had a chance to write the book, I would say Columbus was discovered in 1492. You see the difference in those two? That's a deconstruction and a reconstruction in a more neutral way. When we look at Africa, because we're dealing with Black History Month, Africa has been projected by many historians, especially in the West, as a very dark place, backward place. And even some of the leading historians were quoted to have said, one is Arnold Toynbee, he was quoted to have said that Africa has done nothing for the onward flow of civilization. And I listened to this, and as many people did, as Carter G. Woodson and the historians had done, and so this needs to be challenged. And what we found out is that even the concept of the African continent has been distorted. When you look at the map in reality, and not the Mercator map, we're using the Gerhard Mercator map, which actually decreases the size of Africa and increases the size of Europe and the Americas. In reality, you could put India and China inside of Africa and you still have room left. It's a huge place. And I had the opportunity to visit 20 African countries and to live in South Africa for 10 years. And it's a huge continent with different climates, with different types of people, and a really interesting history. So I want to look at that and celebrate greatness. I want to go back in time with you to ancient Egypt, that the Egyptians in ancient times called Kemet. And when you look at this ancient map, it shows you Upper Egypt below and Lower Egypt on the top. And that is because the Nile River flows south-north. You would think it's opposite on the map, but the mountains are in Ethiopia and Uganda, and so it's flowing north. Similarly was the civilization. To celebrate this brilliance, African Black brilliance, I want to go back in time to 3200 BC. At that point, the great leader Namir, who's known as Menes, he united Upper and Lower Egypt, and that was an amazing act to be done in the ancient world. It created one of the largest political structures on earth at the time. And just uniting one group and another is one thing. But for our brilliance sake, and to wipe away some of the misunderstandings, this is the actual face of Namir. Now, we have seen movies and been projected that the Egyptians were actually a Mediterranean type people. But if you look at his face, if you put a baseball cap on his head, he would look like a Black Canadian, Black American, typical African person. This is the great Pharaoh who united Upper and Lower Egypt. Some of the achievements they made in 2650 BC, they built the structure. This is the step pyramid of Saqqara, which is still in existence today. This is a recent picture. If we in Canada have a building that is over 100 years old, it's a national monument. This is 2650 BC. If you go inside, I had the chance to go down in the pyramid, you'll see structures underneath the ground. And this is just a picture of one of the rooms underneath with hieroglyphics and amazing information that African people had in the ancient times. Let's go a step further and we'll ride our camels and we'll go to another place called Giza. And there we see the Great Pyramid of Giza, 2560 BC. What is important about this pyramid? Number one, black brilliance. This is the Pharaoh. This is the Pharaoh, Khufu was his name. Again, clearly an African face. He was the Pharaoh for whom the national movement was made to build this pyramid, and they built one of the greatest structures of all time. If you look closely at this picture, there's a white dot in the middle on the bottom. That's a water truck to try to visualize how big this building is. 2,300,000 blocks of granite. The corners of the pyramid are perfect right angles. They face north, south, east, and west. It was the largest building, the tallest on earth up until about the 18th century. And some of the stones are actually 10 tons. This is brilliance in ancient Africa. And if you don't believe it, that's me standing there in front of the stone. And you can see how large it actually, how did they take that stone from Aswan in the south, bring it and put it into place with no cement? This is a brilliant society. And by 2000, university structures were there. This is the Temple of Karnak. And look at the size of the columns that are there. Now, our curriculums, and this is what Carter Woodson and the historians found out. Our curriculums told us that it was the ancient Greeks who began math and science and civilization as we know it. But Greek civilization did not kick in till about 700 BC. So that's like 2,000 years after the step pyramid was actually built. If you look at the society in England, this is the Stonehenge structure, 1,600 BC, and you compare that with the Great Pyramid, how could Arnold Toynbee say that Africa has done nothing for civilization? And the Greeks were not racist, by the way. The Greeks said we got our civilization from the Egyptians and the Phoenicians, and the Egyptians were dark-skinned people with curly hair. Let's take it a step further. In the ancient world, going into the after BC to AD, one of the great thinkers and historians, Mani, he said around the year 500 BC that there were four great powers in the world. One was Rome, the other was Persia, the third was three kingdoms in China, and the fourth was Aksum, which is the Ethiopian dynasty. And they were so powerful that they would bring elephants and warfare, and they had the largest obelisk in the world. And so Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and this is where Muslims now come in and sort of coincide and intersect with our understanding of Black brilliance. In the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Black people were not considered to be weak people. And this is a misunderstanding even for Muslims. because they tend to think that African people were mainly slaves. That is not the case. In the ancient world, the Egyptians, the Ethiopians were a powerful nation, to the point where when Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was teaching the belief in one God, he broke down racism and class divisions. He was being punished and persecuted by his people called the Quraysh. So in the year 615, he told his followers, you can leave Mecca and go across the Red Sea. If you look at your map and you'll see Mecca and Jeddah, go down to where it says Eritrea. And so they made a move seeking refuge back then in 615. The prophet said to his followers, if you go to Abyssinia, that was the name for Aksum at the time, Al-Habasha in Arabic. If you go to Abyssinia, it would be better for you, for in it there is a king who will not tolerate oppression. It is a land of truth. Go until such time as Allah shall relieve you from your distress. So he told them, Hiya ardu sidq, that this is a land of truth. And what happened was the companions, these are now early Muslims, not entering Africa as slave traders, but as refugees. A Christian emperor named Ashama, his title was the Negus or Najashi, he gave them sanctuary, and he eventually, according to our traditions, embraced Islam himself, and he is buried in the town called Negash. This is in the Tigray area of Ethiopia, which unfortunately now is going through a lot of different changes. But Ashama gave sanctuary. And so what does it show? It shows an Arabian prophet of Islam cooperating with a Christian ruler, one giving sanctuary to another. And it is reported that when the Great Migration went to the city of Medina, 32 Abyssinians went to Medina. So amongst the early companions of the Prophet were many Black people, African people, more than what we commonly know. The famous Sahabi's name is Bilal. But the Muslims were under attack. The Romans attacked from the north. The Persians attacked them from the east. And they responded to the attacks and found that especially the Byzantine Romans were oppressing their people. And so they opened up the land. And the dark green here shows you the places where Islam spread rapidly during that time, not with large conquering armies. The armies were fighting against the Roman oppression, and but it was missionaries and pious people that spread the message. When they reached all the way across North Africa, they realized that there was gold coming from the south. It was the largest active gold mines in the world, coming from Senegal River and the Niger River. And so an active trade began. And so we celebrate the brilliance of great West African empires like Ghana, Takror, Mali, Songhai, one of the greatest leaders in Mali, and we celebrate again his brilliance. His name was Mansa Musa. And I want you to Google this. Young people like to Google everything. I want you to Google who is the richest man who ever lived and see what comes up. It's not Jeff Bezos. It will say the richest man who ever lived was Mansa Musa, a Black African emperor. Pound for pound, the richest person who ever lived. He made pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324. He carried 72,000 people across the Sahara Desert. When he came back, he brought scholars, architects, missionaries along with him. He built mosques. He built centers everywhere he went, and he fell in love with a city called Timbuktu. And in my time, Timbuktu was a joke. They say, oh, go to Timbuktu, like you're lost. But no, Timbuktu was a city of trade, and then it became a city of knowledge, to the point where in the 16th century, Timbuktu had a university called Sankore University, 25,000 African students studying not only religious studies, they were studying astronomy, math, geography. It was an amazing civilization at that point in time. But soon after that, the Atlantic slave trade began. And when the trade shifted from the desert to the oceans, the European nations coming out of the Dark Ages went to Africa and seized African people and then bought them from other African nations and began a trade where millions of Africans were brought into the Americas. Countless numbers of people died in the Middle Passage, and we celebrate the resistance and resilience of African people going through this terrible trauma. What a lot of people don't realize, and here is where we come together again, somewhere between 15 and 30% of the enslaved Africans were Muslims. We want to celebrate some of them. We have now eyewitness documents, we have reports, we have autobiographies written in the Arabic language. These are some of the famous African Muslims. Abdurrahman ibn Ibrahim, he was a great leader, captured, taken to Mississippi. He eventually won his freedom. There was a treaty between America and Morocco, which was the first country to recognize them. There was a treaty, and the agreement was any Muslim or Moor or somebody from a Muslim country who was caught would be liberated. Ayub ibn Sulaiman, another great leader. Umar bin Sayyid, I'll go right through this because of our time. Umar bin Sayyid, he wrote his own biography in Arabic in America, and it still exists today in the museums in America. Oh, Lizzie Gray, a famous Muslim woman living especially in South Carolina, Fatima and Phoebe in the Gullah Islands off the coast of Georgia, Francois Macandal, who along with Bookman initiated the Great Haitian Revolution, for those of you who know the history of the Americas. The Maroon resistance in Jamaica. Many of the Maroons were actually Muslims as well. We celebrate Nanny of the Maroons, Sam Sharp. And what is not known is that the British who fought the Maroons tricked them into a treaty, and a number of them were brought to Canada, to Nova Scotia. And then they were taken to Sierra Leone. But slavery, fortunately, was abolished. And we remember Harriet Tubman in America, who was carrying people in what they call the Underground Railroad, reaching up all the way to Canada. Frederick Douglass, another great abolitionist, who actually came from a Muslim family. This was the Underground Railroad, but unfortunately, slavery was a trauma upon African people, and for many people, nothing was left but a memory. But resilience was there, even though slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, these are terms used in America for repeated oppression, African people still made great contributions to society. I'll close off this presentation by giving you just a few of these great achievements. The automatic gear shift was invented by Richard Spikes in 1932. He was a black man. Now, this is going to be a shock to you when you hear this. Elijah McCoy was a Canadian, Canadian black, who had over 57 US patents. He was so great in dealing with lubrication of steam engines that, we used to say whenever we got a product, is this the real McCoy? Meaning, was it Elijah McCoy? Is that his machine? Because that's the one that you want. That was a black man. The ironing board was invented by Sarah Boone, a black woman. Garrett Morgan developed gas masks and traffic signals. Stop at the red light, slow down at the yellow light, go at the green light. Charles Drew, he did major developments like the blood bank. Shirley Jackman, caller ID, touch tone telephones. She was involved in fiber optics. These are African Americans who came through the trauma of slavery. The automatic elevator, Alexander Miles. Clothes dryer, George T. Sampson. Electric lamps, Louis Latimer. Folding chairs, John Purdy. The lawnmower, John Albert Burr. The mop, Thomas Stewart. Potato chips. What would the world be like without potato chips? George Crumb. America's first modern clock, Benjamin Banneker. And the mailbox, Philip Downey. That's just the tip of the iceberg, and we celebrate this brilliance. And I wanted to end this presentation with one of our shining saints, Malcolm X, because today is the actual anniversary of when he was martyred, when he died, when he was assassinated in America. And so we remember the brilliance of this man and all of those African Americans who overcame the pain of slavery to still produce and become part of our society. So in conclusion, I pray that with more inclusion, with more understanding of each other, if races of people, if religions understand each other, then we can break down hatred and we break down fear. And that is one of the greatest causes of racism. So we celebrate that today, and we pray that Canada can be a place where all races and religions can hold hands, that we can have a society and we can live in peace and in justice. I thank you for your time. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khairan. Wow. Just wow, that was an excellent presentation, very, very informative. And I really, really love and respected how you brought up the point at the very beginning of the presentation that the dynamic of racism slide. And you explained that before we recognize and celebrate and embrace Black brilliance, we must look at the history, analyze the struggles, and see how that affects people showcasing and getting to know their inner brilliance. So I really, really appreciated that presentation, Sheikh. That was really amazing. Now I have a question for you. So as a well-itinerant scholar, historian, honorary chief of the Sierra Leone, and a well-respected and looked up to religious leader in the Islamic world, with, of course, evidently a treasure of knowledge, we would like to understand from you about how in celebrating Black History Month, we should be able to include, recognize, embrace, and celebrate Black brilliance in the Islamic history modern day that has been forgotten about in the midst of Islamophobia and that has marked out Muslims in Islam.
Yes, this is just another attempt to right the wrongs and to make inclusion in our history so that our understanding of each other as human beings increases and it breaks down fear and ignorance. Just like we have in Canada, October, Islamic History Month, Black History Month helps us to wipe away misunderstandings concerning African people. And so there is a point where you can see racism based upon fear and ignorance and Islamophobia, which is the fear and ignorance of Muslims as well. And so it is through knowledge, it is through sharing, it is through empowerment that we can break down the barriers between our groups.
Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much. All right, next we have with us Mayor Wade Mills. Mr. Mills got his law degree from the University of Halifax and practiced law in his firm in this beautiful town of Shelburne. And Mayor Wade Mills has always been active in the community, coaching minor ball hockey and being on both the Fair Board and the Economic Development Committee, the Center Deaf and Recreation Complex, the Business Improvement Association, and the Fire Board. He successfully ran for council in 2014 and for mayor in 2018, and has definitely embraced all aspects of diversity and equality during his leadership. Now, Mr. Mills, carrying on your father's great legacy, you have always been active in the community and serving the town of Shelburne in an exemplary manner. As an excellent community leader who has continuously contributed in ensuring equity, equality, inclusion, and diversity are practiced and accepted in the town of Shelburne, why do you think it is important to take the time to celebrate Black History Month?
Thank you, Soha, and let me just say off the bat, thank you very much for that initial presentation. I mean, it's certainly clear that I'll be taking much more away from this discussion tonight than I'll be bringing to it. But yeah, I mean that was remarkable, and I think a great encapsulation of a few thousand years of history in something that was very easy for all of us to understand and appreciate. I know that I certainly picked up quite a few nuggets there that I frankly hadn't known before. So thank you very much for that presentation. To your question, Sohat, one of the real priorities that I had when I decided to put my name forward as a candidate for mayor was to try to develop a community within the town of Shelburne that really is more inclusive, more cohesive, and more accepting of all of its residents. The deputy mayor who joins us tonight as well can attest to this, that when he and I first discussed the prospects of running, this whole discussion was very much at the heart of what it was that we were trying to achieve. And fortunately, we were both lucky enough to end up in the positions we are now to implement that stuff. When Steve and I first ran, you know, I'll be frank, the physical symbolism of our partnership, I don't think was lost on either of us. You know, the notion that two people who may look very different, who have different backgrounds, can come together, stand shoulder to shoulder, and through, you know, friendship, partnership, and through shared values and a shared vision for, you know, what a community can become, can really work together and move people along, I think, in the right direction. A little bit of background for those of you on the call tonight who aren't familiar with our town. We're just under 10,000 people officially. And that population level has been achieved rather quickly. So when I grew up here and went to high school in the late 90s, you know, we were somewhere around the 4,000 to 5,000 mark, and so we've grown very, very quickly in a very short period of time. And not only have we seen our numbers increase, we've seen our diversity, you know, really take hold. And Shelburne is, without a doubt, the most diversified community in terms of race, in terms of culture, in terms of religion within Dufferin County. And again, that's something that has happened very quickly. And one of the things that I recognized, you know, having been on council last term, was that this diversification within our community presents enormous opportunities for everybody involved. But I think it has to be encouraged, and it has to be fostered and grown in such a way as that it's seen as a positive opportunity, as opposed to something to be feared or something to be you know, challenged. And again, when the deputy mayor and I decided to throw our names into the ring, for lack of a better term, I think we both understood that our community really stood at a crossroads, and the opportunity to move the community towards a really inclusive place, as opposed to a place where, you know, people may dig in and really try to settle into only what they're comfortable with or what they've known for their whole lives. That crossroads was an important point, and Steve and I talked about the fact that there really wasn't a whole lot of time to lose in that venture, and if we were going to move the community towards that inclusive, cohesive community that we envisioned, then we had to start that work now. And I mean, as the discussion goes on tonight, I'm sure we can get into some specifics as to the sorts of things that we're doing. But certainly having folks like you as real partners at the table within our community is, you know, such a great thing to see, and really helpful in trying to, you know, move along the kind of work that Steve and I are trying to do at the political level.
Thank you so much. I can definitely say that as a resident of Shelburne, you and Deputy Mayor Anderson have made our town much better and enjoyable, and you have definitely embraced all aspects of diversity and made me feel like Shelburne is more of a home and a family than a town. So thank you so much. All right, so next we have Mr. Jamal Jackson, nationally and internationally recognized independent artist, creative entrepreneur, and arts educator, recently appointed Ottawa English Poet Laureate, a position that has not been occupied in the capital city of Canada, Ottawa, for the past 27 years. He has been awarded with the Outstanding Artist Educator Award by the Ontario Arts Foundation, national recognition for TVO and CBC for his appearance on Canadian documentaries directed by award-winning filmmaker Randy Kelly, and first place recipient for the Best New Poem at the Body Electric Poetry Film Festival for his cinepoem Husnia. In 2016, he was a finalist in the Emerging Artist Award presented by RBC. He is an artist, poet, writer, spoken word practitioner, recording rap artist, as well as a stage performer. Mr. Jackson has worked with youth for over 17 years and has taught songwriting, performance, hip hop, and poetry workshops, and has been recognized by his peers for the creative activities that he uses to keep learners actively engaged. He helps artists reach their goals within various artistic fields. Now, Mr. Jackson, as you know, the world of poetry is a vessel for creativity. And as your poetry showcases, you have revived art and poetry and have become the most admired, prominent Muslim poet in the Islamic world of Canada today. Now, as a sensational Black Muslim artist and poet, you have brought your beautiful art to audiences not only locally, but even on an international level, since you make such strong connections with your readers and audiences. How did you discover this inner brilliance of yours, and how did you manage to take it to such incredible heights?
Greetings, greetings, greetings. First of all, I am not worthy of such a fabulous and remarkable introduction. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for doing the work. Thank you for being present and bringing awareness to Black excellence. Oh, wow. First of all, and also just having, taking time on a Sunday evening to be amongst such esteemed individuals, people who are about community. It makes this evening just one that I'm looking forward to Monday now, because now my Sunday evening is just one of amazing engagement. So that question, I discovered it when I would say that I didn't discover it actually. I think it discovered me. I truly believe that it was written in my path for poetry to present itself to me at 9 years old. I was new to Ottawa. I was new to Canada. I was born in Toronto, but then my father took me back to Guyana, where he was born. As an infant, he brought me there so that I could be raised in Guyana. When I came back to Canada, we settled in Ottawa, and I was 9 years old, and I was put into a class, an ESL class, because the teachers thought I couldn't speak English, even though in Guyana, we speak English. We write English, we read English, but we have an accent, a patois or a Caribbean accent. So they put me in ESL, and the idea was to keep me there for 2 years until I could speak English, because they thought I was speaking a foreign language. And I would go to the library a lot, and I would read. And I found a book of poems by Langston Hughes, an African-American poet who's no longer alive. But when I found his book of poems, I read this poem called Harlem. And in the poem, Langston speaks about feeling displaced or feeling like he can't achieve his dreams being in Harlem, like growing up in Harlem. And I felt the exact same way growing up here in Ottawa, because I felt othered coming back to Canada. And of course, I didn't remember as an infant that Guyana's, that was pretty much to me my place of birth, because I was there so young. But I did really feel othered. I got, teased a lot for my accent, the color of my skin. And so when I found poetry, I remember writing a poem that same night, just trying my hand at writing poetry. And it so happened to be a love letter to a girl in grade 6. It was just like, I adored this girl in grade 6. And I thought, Valentine's Day is coming up. Let me see what I could do here. Let me try my hand at this poetry thing. And I remember reciting it to students and in the class. And even though they didn't understand me, they stood up and clapped for me. And that's when I realized that words have power. And it was that moment I knew that I wanted to use language as a form of communication, of course, but also to reach people. So that was it. It was like, when I was 9 years old. And it's been, it's been the way that I try to lead my life since then, just using poetry. So long story short, sorry about that. But I have 2 poems for you, and I've been welcomed to, invited to recite 2 poems. The first one is a bit shorter, and the second one is a longer one. So I hope you bear with me. I'm a spoken word poet. I enjoy telling stories, spinning some of my own narrative into the story, but also taking from the experiences of others too, and trying to bring together something that brings about awareness and hope. So the first one is actually about privilege. I don't often begin my Black Legacy Month poetry recitals with this poem, but I know I only have 2 poems, and I really wanted to talk about privilege and how you need to understand that when you have a certain level of privilege, but privilege that also came from oppression, the oppression from other groups and individuals, how do you leverage your privilege now so that other people feel welcome, other people feel like they belong? And I remember sitting in a cafe at an art show. There was a performer on stage, and before she began speaking, she started talking about all of these this land that she owns in the Algonquin forests. And as she was talking about all this land, and I looked around in the audience, there's all these people of color here. And there's indigenous people here, there's Black folk here. And she was a white lady, and she's talking about all this land she has since, 200 years ago, 150 years ago. And I realized she's not reading the room properly. She's got a lot of privilege, and she doesn't understand how all the folk in this room had to fight to belong, had to struggle to find belonging. And so I wrote this poem while she was reciting, giving her banter. And it goes like this. This poem is not sewn with needle and yarn. It is weaved between the scars of a ghetto child's backyard. I wish I could tell you that this poem was knitted on the porch of a log cabin overlooking acres of sacred free man's land, handed down through generations of privilege traded like the good deeds of fair treaties. But this poem was stitched on the backs of broken natives, beaten into the psyche of modern day Black men whose eyes are still wet from drowning in debt, and their mothers, daughters, sisters, and wives are scratching their heads wondering where all the good Black men went. This poem does not offer service or salvation. It only offers the pain of colonization, a reminder that emancipation only comes to those who can afford to sacrifice their soul, who march to the tune of what they are told, who hold on to a faith that isn't originally theirs. I have long looked into the space where joy, creation, and love exist, and I have come to find that if we do not defeat arrogance, there is no such place. Only a heaven can provide such bliss on the days I feel absolutely confident in an afterlife. That is, there is only the fallacy that paradise can be purchased by turning another person's life into misery. See, I will never be in the 1%. And nor am I part of the greater 99, for my spirit knows my greatness, but the elite won't let me fly, and still subjects me to the state of an animal, because to the state, I am lesser than an animal, a flightless creature, an optimist that believes that I could achieve my dreams as long as I fight for my peace and die trying to find the keys to my freedom in the meantime. I will listen to the songs sung by the dead, remember the words of my ancestors ringing through my head, and allow for now that woman sitting in the cafe, knitting her sweater as if she knows better, watching the songstress on stage tell stories of cabins that belong to her foreparents for generations in Algonquin forests. I will allow them to go undisturbed. But when I start running and finally shed myself of fear to be Pharaoh, no longer peasant, I will have my kingdom. And the sorrow of pitiful servitude will only be for those whose arrogance destined them to a life of bitterness, and who, for the life of them, could not sow gratitude. So that poem is titled Gratitude. And it's essentially about this woman not understanding how privileged she is to be able to brag about land that belongs to her Irish, family in the Algonquin forest. And, I just felt like with that privilege, there's a lack of gratitude for all that other individuals that take up space in this country have done. All of the, how we've contributed, all of the contributions that Black individuals have contributed to this nation. And it made me wonder, how grateful can she be for other individuals that don't look like her? How grateful can she be for our presence? And so I wrote that poem. The next poem is about Black excellence. And, I've been organizing Black Legacy Month events since I was in middle school. And lots have changed since then, but some things are the same. However, one thing that I've realized since high school, as our esteemed Dr. Quick mentioned, is that the erasure of the Black experience and Black contributions is systematic. I did not know about my ancestry. I did not hear about Black stories and Black brilliance. My father taught it to me, and I had to research it myself. But in the school systems and everywhere I went, never heard about it. We were taught to idolize whiteness, period. Whether it was the entertainment we consumed, we were taught to idolize whiteness. And I'm not just talking about European whiteness, anything that was not Black or colored, we were taught to idolize. And so when I found out about my ancestry, in 2013, and that was only because my mother passed away. And I was able to find out about her ancestry on her side of her family. I was shocked that these things were never told to me because we didn't even know. We didn't even know. And so this poem is called Nothing About Us Without Us. When I was a young boy, my mother taught me not to complain about my state, and my father taught me how to maintain when I'm going through pain, see? You see, they both instilled in me a deep sense of willpower, resilience, and faith. Resilience and faith, they mixed positivity into my veins and etched belief in the power of myself into my brain so that I could succeed, so that I could proceed to make change in the legacy of our family tree where they did not have the ability. And it was evident, given that I was the son of a woman who battled lifelong mental illness and a father who suffered PTSD and drug addiction, my parents showed me through their own misfortunes that life is not worth living if it is not lived with purpose and conviction. And I share this with you because as a young Black boy growing up in Canada with Afro-Caribbean roots, I always found it troubling that the truth of my history was never mentioned to me. That every February, all I was taught in school was that Black people came from slavery. I found myself struggling with the idea that I could not trace the lineage of my ancestry, and that I, out of all the children in the playground, could not identify where I came from. And this sense of lost identity carried with me. As I faced the duality of being Black, on the inside feels like an empty cavern, and the outside seeming out of place. It carried with me until it was the baggage that I had come to grow familiar with, as if someone had traded my sense of belonging with their own interpretation of home. Told I was to stay in ESL for 2 years because I had to clean up my Guyanese accent. Called by teachers and students Jamaica instead of Jamal because every Black person that is not obviously African must be a character out of Cool Runnings. Rebuked when I bumped into a teacher and he told me that I should get my cotton picking hands off him, and I was in grade 7 at the time. Told by guidance counselors that I should enroll in applied courses because I wasn't smart enough to be academic, yet called into meetings by my teachers who thought all my original essays were copywritten. And this prejudice I witnessed it, and it wasn't only relegated to me. I've seen countless Black youth subjected to the same racial bias. My Black partner in high school called racial slurs by her math teacher in front of the class. White students who loved my company openly but spoke secretly about the foreign scent of Black Africans. And as the years passed on, I was exposed to the unspoken hypocrite, the culprit of color privilege that made our bodies not matter, our voices a non-factor, and our contributions of no significance or importance, so that when I became a young man, I was convinced that I had come from nothing and in turn could only end up being nothing. I saw many young Black men succumb to the same feelings, and young Black women express that just the expression of their existence is indecent. And though I wanted to scream, lash out, and at times felt like I should just take my own life, willing to become the very thing society had labeled for me, a denizen of denigrate qualities, I could not. And instead I kept silent because my father and my mother had taught me not to complain and how to maintain when life delivers me pain. And being mute and resilient was the solution to combating the hardships of oppression, or so I thought. You see, a revelation had come to me. In 2012, when my mother had passed away into the realm of the spirits to join our ancestors, is when I first heard of the richness of our lineage. It was in the story of my maternal family's journey to Canada by the persistence and courage of a woman named Anna Marie Jackson, who escaped slavery with 7 of her children and settled in Toronto. A story of how 2 of her sons became successful entrepreneurs while the youngest child pursued the prestigious position of a letter carrier with Canada Post. How this youngest of 7 faced oppression at the hands of a system that wasn't made to appreciate Black brilliance. They told him that they would not train him and made every effort for him to fail, even though he was overqualified to deliver the mail. And that is when the revelation spoke to me loud and clear. Because it was only then when the Black community stepped up and spoke out to defend the rights of this young, bright, and gifted Black star did Sir John A. Macdonald running for his 2nd term in office see the advantage of involving the Black voice in the political spectrum. He convinced the employees of Canada Post to train this young man, thus securing the votes of the Black community in Toronto. And as a result, Albert Jackson, my great-great-great-grandfather, influenced the federal election, and my great-grandfather became Canada's first Black postman. It is no coincidence. Exactly 100 years later, I came into this world, a Black prince with purpose. It is not a matter of irony that I too now use my voice as a poet, a scribe who delivers messages of remembrance of Black sacredness and Black excellence, messages that Black women have held the flag of defense for decades in the fight for Black rights. Exampled by Viola Desmond, a successful businesswoman who refused to move her feet and give up her seat. Messages like that of Rocky Jones and Wanda Bernard, who spoke in the tone of "I am not your Negro." Messages of Mathieu da Costa and Matthew Henson, the first Black explorers in Canada, both facing the unknown. Messages of telling our stories, producing the art that reflects our journey and resonates with our soul, as if we had never been poet laureates George Eliot L. Jones. Messages of the Justice for Abdirahman Abdi Coalition. Messages of recognition, justice and development as part of the International Decade, in the International Decade for People of African Descent. Messages that no matter your color, ethnicity, or creed, it is illegal for human beings to be on the receiving end of discrimination. So when my parents taught me how to hold pain and not to complain, what they were really teaching me was to find an effective way to speak, to reveal the difficulties of inequality by bringing visibility to marginalized groups and minorities, so that when we reflect on the legacy of us as a society of how we have progressed towards a culture of pluralistic values, we will remember our place in history, that no conversation about legislation should be discussed without our knowledge and express permission. Nothing about us without us. This is our mission, and our work will never be done until this country acknowledges our presence, contributions, and existence, until the fight for recognition is won. So in that poem, I try to deliver the message that we've been here, our ancestors have been here, continuing to help shape this nation. And any sort of silencing, erasure, or othering, it can't be accepted anymore, because this nation is beautiful and we should move together towards that beauty. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate all of your time. Thank you, of course, to the Dufferin Mosque and the Muslim Association. Appreciate you, and happy Black Legacy Month.
Wow, thank you so incredibly much. Just sitting there listening to you, you speak with so much passion and meaning and ambition in your poems. It was really great listening to. Thank you so much for being here and giving us your very valuable time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now it is with my great pleasure that I introduce Deputy Mayor Steve Anderson, who is Deputy Mayor for the town of Shelburne and a regional councillor for the county in Dufferin. In addition, Deputy Mayor Steve is a practicing litigation lawyer with over 16 years of experience with the Toronto Transit Commission, where he has received a number of awards for his distinguished service. He has extensive community experience that includes serving as the former Vice President for the Ontario College of Kinesiology, board member for Community Care Access Center, citizenship appointment for the City of Brampton, task force, and currently serves as the Director for Defence Construction Canada. Regarding his personal accomplishments, Deputy Mayor Anderson was proud to be named by the Toronto Star as one of the top 50 Jamaicans in the GTA in 2013, and equally proud of his acknowledgement by the House of Commons for his community service. Mr. Anderson is also a strong believer in family and is a proud father of 2 children, Asia and Devante. Now, Mr. Anderson, in 2004, you became the first ever Black lawyer hired in the TTC legal department. You made history again as the first Black city councillor in 2017, and in 2018, historically again, the town of Shelburne was honored by you being elected as the first Black deputy mayor of Shelburne. Now, what did these great accomplishments mean to you and the future of Black history in Black communities in Shelburne?
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Let me just start off with that first. And I want to thank Sheikh Solomon and the Muslims of Dufferin, and of course the Solomon family, for taking this opportunity to celebrate Black excellence. We heard from Dr. Quick and from my brother Jamal, and the question is, what else needs to be said, right? As to why we need to celebrate Black excellence. And I know I'm going to get to your question in a second. But it's interesting, you know, we could clearly see after hearing from Dr. Quick and my brother Jamal our true value. And yet we are here in 2021 still fighting to prove our worth when it's so obvious. I was inspired to hear the presentation from Dr. Quick reminding us of the royalty in our history. And as an adult sitting here, as he was going through his presentation and ended with the inventors, as a grown man in my 40s, I was moved and inspired and felt like I was wearing a crown on my head. Could you only imagine for a moment what it would feel like if our children got access to this information? And it begs the question, why is this information not being taught in our schools? And maybe we know the answer, but it is a question that needs to be answered. In order for our people to move forward, we have to know our history. We have to know our royalty. We have to know our value. And when we know our value, despite the systemic barriers, the prejudice, and the racism that exist, when you hold your value, that's what's going to allow you to overcome. And so I'm just here to say that I'm really proud of what I've heard today. It's an inspiration to me, and for me to continue to use my platform to be able to encourage others. So what does it mean? The successes that I've had, being the first, as you've spoken about, well, it's a tribute, let me put it that way, to those who have paved the way. And my success is owed to them, because without them paving the way, I wouldn't be able to be here before you in the positions that I'm able to occupy right now. So it's a thank you to them. It's also inspiration to the younger ones that are coming up behind, so that they could too see what is possible. You know, we see on social media the hashtag representation matters, and it does, because when people see themselves in you and they see them, people like ourselves in the different positions that we hold, then they're allowed to believe, they're permitted to believe that these positions are also possible for them. And so that's what the legacy of Black excellence should be. It's about celebrating the past, reminding ourselves of who we are, celebrating those who are in the trenches today, like Brother Jamal and Dr. Quick, and then those who are looking to inspire to carry the torch tomorrow. So that's what it means to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I really, really appreciate it. All right, so our final guest speaker for tonight is the Honorable MP Kyle Seaback, current Member of Parliament for the Federal Riding of Dufferin-Caledon, who also represented the Federal Riding of Brampton West from 2011 to 2015. He was a member of the Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development and the Justice and Human Rights Committees, representing over 232,000 residents in the largest constituency in the nation. Having earned a Bachelor of Laws degree from University of Western Ontario, he worked as a civil litigation lawyer at the firm Simons de Silva and Sinton in Brampton, Ontario. After a brief departure from politics, he trained as a mediator. He is the member of the Alternative Dispute Resolution Institute of Ontario and has been certified by the University of Windsor Law School. He's an outspoken voice for freedom of speech and strong democratic institutions. He was instrumental in helping pass the Reform Act, a critical piece of legislation that enhances the independence of MPs. And since being elected to represent the riding of Dufferin-Caledon, he has become a champion of small businesses, farmers, and reliable and affordable high-speed and rural internet. Now, MP Kyle Seaback, Dufferin and Caledon areas are truly blessed to have such an exceptionally wonderful MP like yourself, who has not only always been an outspoken voice for freedom of speech and strong democratic institutions, but also strongly believe in equity, equality, inclusion, and diversity, which are extremely important for many. Can you share the federal government's perspective on celebrating Black History Month with us this evening?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to thank you for that wonderful introduction. Assalamu alaikum. And I want to thank Sheikh Yeha for setting this up, and of course, Muslims of Dufferin. When we look at Black History Month here in Canada, it's the 25th anniversary. And I think as we talk about what the future is now, that is how we're looking at Black History Month this year, we should take a little look back, I think. And so one of the things I like to do is I like to talk about one person that hasn't been brought up tonight is Lincoln Alexander, who was the first Black member of Parliament elected in Canada in 1968, and who also went on to become I'm going to get this wrong, not the Governor General in Ontario. I'm getting that wrong. He went on to become the Governor General for Ontario. And of course, we cannot forget about the Honorable Jean Augustine, who of course brought forward Black History Month. These are two exceptional individuals that all Canadians should be proud of. When we're talking about some of the people that I've heard today, history of Black contributions, one that I just thought I would mention, because I learned about this over the past summer in a movie that was called Hidden Women. And in fact, the moon landings that took place in the United States would not have been possible without some exceptional Black women who never received recognition at the time and only received some under President Barack Obama, one of whom was Katherine Johnson. So we need to share and celebrate those stories all the time. And I've heard from our panelists tonight talk about how important it is to talk about the incredible contributions the Black community has made, not just in Canada, but of course, all across the world. At the federal level, I think that we're starting to recognize the importance of issues like racism and systemic racism. Right now, we actually have a Minister of Diversity and Inclusion. And underneath that umbrella is the Anti-Racism Secretariat, which is tasked with trying to eliminate systemic racism throughout the federal government. These are things we have to move forward on, and we have to do it sooner rather than later. And I've spoken about this on other panels. One other thing that I do want to talk about, because we're talking about the future is now, and I think one thing that we haven't talked about yet is Leslyn Lewis, who is a Black woman who almost won the leadership of the federal Conservative Party. That is a pretty extraordinary feat. If a couple of things had changed, we had a ranked ballot system, if a couple of things had gone differently on the second or third ballot, she would be the leader of the federal Conservative Party. And I think that is also something that we should be very proud of and as we look forward. I think that we need to increase Black representation in the House of Commons. Right now, the Black community is about 3.5% to 4% of the Canadian population, but they're only about 1.2% of the members of Parliament. So there's a significant underrepresentation of the Black community at the federal level, and this is something we 100% have to figure out how we're going to address it. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about my time on the Justice Committee. We do have systemic racism in the criminal justice system here in Canada, and it's something that we need to move on, and we need to move on it quickly. And I've had some conversations, in fact, with Deputy Mayor Anderson about this, and I think we have to start looking at ways to address this urgently. Because we see it. The facts and the reports are in about the systemic racism in the justice system, in particular for the Black community. As your member of Parliament here, I want to be your voice on all issues. And that is especially important when we're talking about diversity, inclusion, and fighting racism. I will be that voice, and I will be a strong voice for that. And thank you so much for having me here tonight.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing. And it is really great that you recognize the lack of diversity and the lack of inclusion that exists, you know, not only in the town of Shelburne or in Dufferin-Caledon, but also on the federal level. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for all your hard work in regards to diversity, inclusion, equity, and equality is truly appreciated by many. So thank you so much. All right, so now our question and answer session is open. So if anybody wants to leave a question, please include the name of the person you would like to answer the question. Imam Suleiman will notify me if there's a question because I'm not too good with this technical stuff. Okay, so we do have a question. I'm not sure who it's for, but whoever feels like they would like to answer the question, please do. This is from Shahla Siddiqui. So how can we continue Dr. King's message of inclusion and equality in our own lives? Take your time.
Perhaps this question for Dr. Quick.
And also, I think Deputy Mayor Anderson, he is really, really passionate and aware of Dr. King's message.
Mhm. Okay, well, what we have to realize is that, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., was a very significant leader, and he was a child and a man of his times. And he stood up, for African-American people, and he began to evolve over time in terms of his understanding till near the end of his life. He was actually defending workers. He was against the war in Vietnam. And so that type of honesty and outspokenness and the ability to confront evil and wrong, I think this is a great legacy of Martin Luther King. And we can continue that, by learning our history, learning about ourselves, and focusing on not only education, but empowerment. So empowerment is very important. I usually, with my students, talk about 3 E's. One is education, one is empowerment with skills development training, and the third is engagement, that we need to engage society. Gatherings like this are important because we're engaging each other, we're sharing ideas. And so by the 3 E's, inshallah, we can do it: education, empowerment, and engagement.
Thank you so much for sharing, Sheikh. So now we have another question, and this is up for grabs as well. So what can we do as a community member? So I'm saying as a member of the community to eliminate racism.
I'll just quickly jump in with a couple of words on this. I think number one, we have to call it out when it exists, especially our political leaders. We have to be prepared to call it out and not make excuses for people who are engaging in any type of racism. One other thing that I learned in my old riding of Brampton West, which was an incredibly diverse riding. I think at the time it was probably 60 or 65% visible minority. And getting to know people from different cultures, from different religions is a great way to break down barriers and reduce the chances of racism. Racism often comes from ignorance. And I know that from my time serving in Brampton, getting groups together, whether it was having some Muslim people come and sit with Christians to talk, or having people from the Caribbean community come and meet with the Sikh community, we start to break down the barriers. We're not strangers anymore. And what I learned so much in that time is, in the end, what we all want are the same things. We want to raise our families in safe neighborhoods. We want to have good jobs. We want a bright future for our children. And I think we have to do so much more to make sure all communities are engaging with each other so that we don't allow those seeds of racism to flourish like they unfortunately do in certain communities in certain parts of the country, in certain parts of the world.
I definitely agree. Thank you. I know the Deputy Mayor wanted to say something, so please go ahead.
Yeah. I guess let me start off by saying this. I'll take it a step further. As political leaders, it's more than just calling out racism when racism occurs. It's about showing from our position and using our platform that we will not tolerate or accept, of course, but by our own behavior, because people are certainly looking up to us. And if we could model what the community should be looking like and behaving like when it comes to these kinds of issues, the hope is that that trickles down and people start to fall in line when it comes to addressing this particular issue, what I refer to as a virus in our community, similar to that of COVID-19. as I've said often. Also, there has to be an understanding that the cry for equality, equity, and inclusion is not one group asking for rights greater than the other. And I think oftentimes when people hear the cry of equity, that they believe that maybe their privilege is going to be disrupted. It means that somebody's asking for more than they deserve. And that's where you start to see the resistance, the systemic barriers that are preventing others to get their rightful place at the table. So I think those are ways that through education, as Kyle said, that we have to provide forums like this, where we could break down the barriers, come together. And this is why this is an excellent opportunity to do just that. If we could do more of this, I certainly think we'll be in a better place.
Thank you so much. So we have two more questions. One of them from Miss Alethea O'Hara Stevenson. So she asks, to any of the political leaders, how can we get more young people engaged in the political process or even in more leadership positions? Can we have a mentorship, / internship session right here in Shelburne as a start, or are there any other opportunities?
I'll jump in on that one if I can. In a broad sense, I think, a couple of things that we can do to try to encourage engagement amongst our youth. Number one is to be relevant. So, talk about the things that our youth are interested in and the issues that they're concerned about. And so, that they can see that these are actually being dealt with and addressed at a political level. If the discussions just simply take place about, things that are in the abstract or things that don't interest them, then of course, it shouldn't be a surprise that they're not going to tap into the process and take a keen interest in what's going on. So number one is being relevant. And I think number two is actually showing results. So, it's not enough just simply to talk about the issues that matter to our youth. But I think it's incumbent upon all of us in positions of leadership in the community to actually deliver results to them so that they can see that the process, when it's functioning properly, actually works. And hopefully that will inspire them to want to get involved in it. To Alethea's other question in terms of, concrete ways that we can try to foster this stuff. I know Alethea has done a great deal of work at the high school through a student advisory council there, which provides some insights to our council at a local level. And those sorts of opportunities, the deputy mayor has organized some tours for students to Queen's Park. Those sorts of things. Giving our youth sort of a front row seat to the process so that they can actually see how it works and realize that, this isn't something that's foreign. I mean, these are ordinary people who are in these positions making important decisions in our community, and they're the leaders of tomorrow. So we need them to take an interest, and we need to show them that this is not something that's, beyond their reach. It wasn't all that long ago that I was a kid sitting in Center Dufferin District High School. Well, fast forward a few years, I'm back in our community, and now I'm sitting with my friend Steve and 5 other council members around the council table making critical decisions about the future of our community.
Thank you so much. Well, I do have to say that yourself and the deputy mayor and the council do an amazing job at including the youth. I definitely always feel included, and I know you guys really value our voices, and you do show results. So thank you so much. We have a final question for the evening coming from Javed Ahmed. So do you think that the current educational curriculum is equipped to teach the new generation about inclusion and diversity? If no, then what has to be done to make it so?
I'm going to suggest that Dr. Quick take this on. I have my own thoughts. Certainly, I don't believe it's equipped. I think it's obvious just based on this conversation we heard from, again, Brother Jamal and Dr. Quick on this issue, and just from my own personal experience growing up. I guess Brother Jamal and I have something in common as well. I was also placed in ESL, but growing up, learning about the things that Brother Quick talked about wasn't there. So it's clear to me that more work needs to be done. But Dr. Quick, take it away, please.
Yes, the curriculum for education should be something based upon truth, and it should be based upon, the reality of history and, what our people have gone through. But unfortunately, curriculums are very political. And I was part of the Toronto Board of Education in the 90s. And it was a liberal time. And so I was, part of an anti-racist committee, and we were actually starting to affect the curriculum. But then when the government changed, everything changed, and the work we did was sort of thrown out. And so really, it does require political will from the top, and also social will from the people on the bottom demanding this, and then objective educators, to come together, respecting all races and all contributions, to give a more balanced curriculum. I mean, we just recently got Christopher Columbus discovering America thrown out of history books, and that's so ridiculous. But that there's a lot more than Christopher Columbus discovering America in 1492. So there's a lot of work to be done. And it really needs to have will on all levels to affect the curriculum, because for many people, the curriculum is the holy grail. Like that is the untouchable item. But it should be something which is very flexible and based upon truth and facts, and not based upon political positions.
Jazakallah khairan. Before we conclude, does anybody want to add anything?
Sorry, Soha, there is last question from Brother Mukhtar. He's asking, yeah, if you can get it, this is the last question. Sorry about that. We went out of time a little bit for 5 minutes. Sorry about that.
So Brother Mukhtar asks, can we start a hotline to report Islamophobia or other racism incidents?
It's an interesting idea. I think that hotlines, we do have ways to bring incidents, racist incidents, to the attention of police and others. A hotline's an interesting idea. I do think there could be potential for abuse when you set up a hotline that anyone can call in and make complaints. But I do think it's something we have to look into to make sure that we do address when Islamophobic statements are made, postings on social media, all of those kinds of things. I mean, we can't have tolerance for it. And I know Islamophobia is an issue that continues to be a challenge here in Canada. We've all seen it. Something to certainly look into.
Thank you so much. Before we do conclude, I would like to invite Imam Yahya Sulaiman to say a concluding prayer.
Thank you so much, our honorable speakers. On behalf of myself and Muslims of Dufferin community, honestly, your speeches are very, very, very enjoyable, very enjoyable. And honestly, I personally benefit from it as usual, and on behalf of Muslim community and Muslims of Dufferin and Muslims of Shelburne Center, thank you so much for the valuable time that you have taken from your very busy schedule. And we are fortunate to have such a wonderful people like you among us. Thank you so much. And as our beloved Muhammad, may peace be upon him, said, the best of people are those who benefit other people. Thank you very much, and may God bless you all, and have a wonderful, beautiful night. Thank you.
All right, and with that, we conclude this exceptionally sublime evening. And on behalf of the Muslims of Dufferin, Muslims of Shelburne Center, and myself, we would like to thank you so incredibly much for giving us your valuable time. Today, we had some truly amazing examples of Black brilliance, excellence, and greatness, and true leadership, which really needs to be showcased more in our world. And there were some truly stupendous words and touching experiences shared with us today. Thank you so much once again, and I wish you all a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.